accused of being a terrorist with fabricated evidence, I revealed the hidden camera footage in court. My mother-in-law, Margaret, collapsed when the judge turned to her. My son, Ethan, looked up at me and said, "Mom says we'll be happier when you're not here anymore." That's when I knew they were plotting behind my back. Our family embodied the white picket fence American dream: barbecues on Sundays, homemade lemonade stands, and matching family outfits. Everything seemed perfect. My wife, Sarah, had only 2 lovers before me, and she was always my first choice. The only exception was my mother-in-law. Margaret was cruel to me because I hailed from Turkey, while Sarah was a true blue American. She hurled insults like camel jockey or kebab boy, her witch-like laughter filling the air as she chuckled with her friends, as if it were the cleverest thing. Initially, Sarah tried to intervene, but I eventually told her to stop, as it only worsened matters. Besides, I was married to Sarah, not her family, so everything should have been fine, right? This is precisely why Sarah and I devised the brilliant plan to invite her family to our Sunday barbecue. It seemed harmless at first. After all, our son, Ethan, needed to bond with Sarah's side. Everything went smoothly initially. Her father hugged me. Her brother brought a housewarming gift. Then came Margaret. "Don't worry, I brought plain hot dogs in case the food's too exotic," she said, her tone so sharp it could have sliced a brick in half. I ignored it, flashing my well-practiced Hollywood smile. "Thank you," I replied, giving her a hearty embrace. I felt her tense up, and it took all my restraint not to chuckle in her ear. After that, things seemed to improve. Everyone was laughing. Our plates gleamed in the sunlight like a tortoise shell on a pristine beach, and our stomachs were full. But midway through the barbecue, I noticed Margaret and Sarah had disappeared for over an hour. I assumed Margaret was delivering one of her "you need to divorce him" speeches, so I brushed it off. Ethan was exhausted by the end, having soaked up so much attention. I knew the barbecue was a success. I wasn't expecting gratitude from Margaret, but on her way out, she surpassed my expectations. "It's not too late to start over," she said cynically, with a hint of menace. I heaved a sigh of relief, grateful the ordeal was over. But later, as we cleaned up, I asked Sarah what that was about. "Oh, you know, the usual," she said. I chuckled, thinking it was her translation of Margaret's typical nonsense. Instead of laughing with me, she stopped, stood still, and glared. For the first time, I saw contempt in Sarah's eyes, like a principal issuing a suspension. A sickening feeling washed over me, but I told myself she was probably exhausted, and this was how it manifested. The next day, Sarah completely ignored me, giving me the silent treatment, colder than an iceberg. But that wasn't the worst. That evening, while watching TV, we saw news of a terrorist incident. Sarah turned to me and said, "You'd know all about that, wouldn't you?" before laughing as if she'd told the world's funniest joke. Until then, she was the first partner who hadn't weaponized my heritage, a major reason I felt safe with her. Her words shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. I retreated to the bathroom and cried, unwilling to accept it. Her words cut like a knife through butter. I knew Margaret was behind this, but when I brought it up, Sarah shrugged and said, "I guess my humor is just evolving." I took a deep breath. She'd never acted like this before. I felt repulsed, not just hurt. I barely saw her that week, not deliberately, but because she suddenly became very busy at work. I spent a lot of time with Ethan. One day, while picking him up from school, he asked if we could stop at Wingstop on the way home. I said no, as I'd prepared dinner for him at home in the fridge. He looked at me as if I'd said something devastating, then blurted out, "Mum says we'll be happier when you're not here anymore." My heart sank. I went silent. My voice caught in my throat, trying not to cry. My mind raced at 1,000,000 miles an hour. With Sarah's recent behavior, things started to click. When we got home, Sarah wasn't back from work yet, so I investigated. As I climbed the attic ladder, a cloud of dust hit my nostrils, making me cough, a foreshadowing of the suffering to come. Inside, I found a box I'd never seen before. The first few documents were mundane tax papers, but what I uncovered beneath made my eyes nearly pop out. Dozens of screenshotted texts, transcribed voice memos, and photos of us, twisted out of context to paint me as a sinister villain. At the bottom, they were all signed by Margaret as a witness. For example, a screenshot of a text I sent Sarah when she was out with friends read, "Don't forget who you belong to," an inside joke from a movie we both loved. The note below it said, "Exhibits controlling behavior, does not allow me freedom." A photo of me looking angry, actually yelling at the TV during a football game was captioned, "Frequently displays rage. I fear for my safety." Every document was signed, "Witness, Margaret Thompson." Digging deeper, I found a draft divorce filing with horrific allegations, emotional abuse, domineering behavior, and claims I had threatened Sarah. According to these papers, I was a rage-fueled time bomb who isolated Sarah from her family and friends, all lies, meticulously crafted to destroy me. At the bottom of the box, I found the most disturbing item, a handwritten plan detailing how Sarah would kidnap Ethan, drain our joint funds, and leave me with nothing, not even visitation rights. I sat in the dusty attic, holding these papers, feeling my world collapse. The wife I loved, the mother of my child, had been building a case against me. For what? To take everything and leave me with nothing? I heard the garage door open downstairs. Sarah was home. I quickly put everything back exactly as I found it and climbed down, my mind racing. What was I going to do? My hands shook so badly I nearly lost my grip on the ladder. In 30 minutes, I'd gone from a confused husband to feeling like a man on death row. "Hey," Sarah said without looking at me, placing her keys on the counter as usual, but nothing felt normal anymore, not her voice, not her movements, nothing. I tried to act casual. "Hey, how was work?" My voice sounded alien, like I was reading from a script. "Fine," she said, brushing past me. I noticed an unfamiliar perfume again. She rushed to Ethan and knelt to give him a big hug. "Hey, buddy, I missed you." Watching them twisted my stomach into knots. Was she planning to take him away from me? According to the documents, that's exactly what she intended. I needed to think, to plan. I mumbled something about checking the mail and stepped outside to breathe. The night air felt cold against my face, likely flushed from stress and anger. Linda, our neighbor, waved from across the street as she walked her dog. I waved back mechanically, wondering if our entire life was about to become neighborhood gossip. That night, I could hardly sleep. Sarah stayed as far from me in bed as possible without falling off. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my thoughts spiraling. What had Margaret said to turn Sarah against me so completely? What was I going to do? The next morning, I called in sick from work. I couldn't focus anyway. After Sarah left with Ethan for school drop-off, I returned to the attic. I photographed everything with my phone, documenting all the lies and manipulations. If things were heading where I feared, I'd need proof. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, researching divorce attorneys on my laptop. I found one with strong reviews, Thomas Rodriguez, who specialized in father's rights. I booked an appointment for the next day during my lunch break. Sarah was surprised to see me home that evening. "I thought you were working late today," she said, sounding slightly irritated. I hadn't mentioned anything like that. "No, what makes you think that?" She shrugged. Must have gotten confused. More lies. She had likely planned something for when I was supposed to be gone. That night I watched her closely, noticing how she kept checking her phone and typing when her back was to me. The next day I met with Thomas. His office was small but professional, with certificates on the wall and family photos on his desk. I showed him the photos of Sarah's paperwork and explained everything. Thomas listened intently, taking notes and asking occasional questions. After I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This is quite a situation, Kadir. Based on what you've shown me, your wife and mother-in-law are preparing a divorce petition that would strip you of custody and most of your assets." He adjusted his glasses. "The good news is, you found this before they served you papers. We have time to prepare." "What should I do?" I asked, feeling utterly lost. "First, don't confront your wife. Act normally. Second, protect your finances. Open a separate account at a different bank and transfer half your savings there. It's still marital property, but this prevents you from being left with nothing. Third, document everything. Record conversations if your state allows it, and keep a journal of all interactions." I left his office with a plan, feeling slightly less terrified. On my way back to work, I stopped at a new bank and opened an account, transferring half our savings as Thomas advised. It felt wrong, but then I recalled the detailed plan to wipe me out. This wasn't deceit, it was self-preservation. That weekend was agonizing. Sarah suggested we take Ethan to the park as a family, which felt like the cruelest idea given what I knew. Still, I went along, pushing Ethan on the swings while Sarah took photos on her phone. Was she capturing our last days as a family or gathering more evidence against me? I couldn't tell anymore. Sarah got a call while Ethan played in the sandbox. She stepped away to answer, and I noticed her face light up in a way it hadn't in weeks. When she returned, I casually asked who it was. "Just Mom checking in," she said, but her eyes avoided mine. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I started the journal Thomas recommended, detailing everything since the barbecue, striving for precision. It felt odd documenting the collapse of my marriage, but I needed to protect myself and, more importantly, my relationship with my son. Monday morning, I called Sarah's father, Robert. We'd always gotten along, and I needed to know if he was part of this scheme. I asked if he could meet me for lunch, just the two of us. He sounded surprised but agreed. We met at a small cafe near his office. Robert looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper. We ordered sandwiches and made small talk until they arrived. Finally, I took a deep breath and dove in. "Robert, I have an important question. Has Sarah told you about any marital problems?" He set down his sandwich, clearly puzzled. "Not at all. Is everything okay between you two?" I studied his face. Either he was an excellent actor, or he genuinely had no idea. I'd decided to take a chance. I found documents in our attic plans for a divorce where Sarah takes everything, including Ethan, based on lies about me being abusive. And your wife signed as a witness to it all. Robert's face paled. "What? That's absurd. Margaret didn't mention anything like this to me." I showed him some photos from my phone. As he swiped through, his expression shifted from shock to something like anger. "This is Margaret's handwriting," he said, handing back my phone. "Kadir, I had no idea. I swear, this isn't right." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I love Sarah, but she's completely changed, and the thought of losing Ethan." My voice cracked unexpectedly. Robert leaned across the table and placed a hand on my arm. "I'll talk to Margaret and Sarah. This has gone too far." I shook my head. "Please, not yet. If they know I found these documents, who knows what they'll do next? I need to protect myself first." He nodded slowly. "I understand, but I want you to know I'm not part of this, and I don't condone it. You've been a great husband and father. Whatever Margaret has planted in Sarah's head is wrong." Having Robert as an ally lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. Before we parted, he promised to watch for any further scheming without revealing what he knew. Over the next week, I played the oblivious husband. Sarah was taking more work calls in private and having hushed phone conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. I kept my journal and checked in with Thomas regularly. Then came another bombshell. Sarah's brother, James, texted me out of the blue. "Hey, man, can we grab a beer tonight? I need to talk about something." We met at a sports bar a few towns away, where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. James looked nervous, fidgeting with his drink coaster. "So, what's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. James took a long swig of his beer. "My mum called me last night. She asked me to submit a statement saying I saw you verbally abusing Sarah at family events." My heart dropped. I told her she was crazy. "I've never seen you be anything but respectful to Sarah. I'm not sure what's going on, but Mom was insistent. Sarah's planning to leave you and wants evidence for the divorce." I told James what I'd found. He was as shocked as his father. "This is messed up, Kadir. Mom's always been tough, but this is next level. What can I do to help?" We spent the next hour strategizing. James agreed to pretend to go along with Margaret's request, while documenting her attempts to fabricate evidence against me. He'd also listen for any talk about their timeline. On the way home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. My wife had betrayed me, but I was touched by the support from her father and brother. I wasn't alone anymore. When I got home, Sarah was waiting, arms crossed. "Where were you?" "Just grabbing a beer with some guys from work," one lied, hating how easy it was now. "Robert's getting divorced." I needed to vent. Something flashed in her eyes. "Divorce, huh? Poor guy." "Yeah," I said, heading to the bathroom to avoid further conversation. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The stress was taking its toll. I looked tired and older. This couldn't go on much longer. The next day, I installed a small camera in our living room, as Thomas had suggested. Though it felt invasive, I needed to protect myself. I ensured it was legal in our state and set it to capture only common areas of the house. The decision paid off sooner than I expected. 2 days later, while reviewing the footage, I saw Sarah and Margaret in our living room while I was at work. "I don't know, Mom. Sarah said, her expression conflicted. This feels wrong. He's never hurt me. Margaret's voice was sharp. Don't be naive, Sarah. Men like him always show their true colors eventually. Remember what your cousin Jen went through. Better to get out now while you have the upper hand. Think about the settlement. You'll never have to work again. What about Ethan? Children are resilient. Besides, you'll be better off without that foreign influence. I watched in horror as Margaret pulled out documents from her bag, the same ones I'd found in the attic. They spent the next hour refining the fabricated evidence, with Margaret coaching Sarah on what to write. Sarah looked uncomfortable at times, but Margaret pressed on. Just think about the beach house we could buy with his 401k, Margaret said, grinning. And the Turkish rug store his brother owns will be worth something too, if we play this right. I felt sick. This wasn't just about getting rid of me, it was about money. Margaret was manipulating her own daughter to swindle me and my family. I saved the video in multiple places and sent a copy to Thomas. He called me immediately after watching it. This is exactly what we needed, Kadir. This proves the allegations are fabricated and shows coercion, but we need to be strategic about how we use it. I agreed, but part of me wanted to confront Sarah right then. How could she do this? Was our entire marriage a lie? That night at dinner, Ethan asked if we could visit Turkey to see my family next summer, and I nearly broke down. Grandma said I can't go there anymore because it's dangerous, he said innocently. Sarah quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. They were already poisoning my son against his heritage and part of who he was. I excused myself from the table before losing my composure entirely. The next day, James called with more news. They're planning to file next Monday. Mum's meeting with some hotshot divorce attorney tomorrow to finalize everything. This accelerated our timeline significantly. Thomas advised me to file first with the evidence we had. If we wait for them to serve you, you'll be on the defensive from day one, he said. We prepared all the paperwork that weekend. I felt like I was living a double life, playing board games with Ethan and making Sunday breakfast while gearing up for a divorce battle. Sarah kept up her act too, but there were moments when she seemed almost like her old self, especially around Ethan. It made me question how much of this was her idea and how much was Margaret's manipulation. Monday morning, I left for work as usual, but went straight to the courthouse. Filing those papers was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Each signature felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. My phone buzzed as I left the courthouse, a text from James. Mum just picked up Sarah from work. They're heading to their lawyer now. You beat them by hours. Sarah was served divorce papers at her office that afternoon. I ensured Ethan was with me, driving him straight from school to my friend John's house, where we'd arranged for him to have a play date with John's son. I didn't want Ethan home for the inevitable confrontation. The storm hit around 6 p.m. Sarah burst through the front door, her face twisted with rage. What the hell is this? She shouted, waving the papers. Divorce papers, I said calmly. I figured I'd save you the trouble of filing yourself. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Sarah. I know everything the fake abuse claims, the plan to take everything, including Ethan, your mother coaching you to set me up. She paled but recovered quickly. You're paranoid. This is exactly why I need to get away from you. Really? So you weren't planning to file for divorce today? Your mum didn't meet with a lawyer last week. That silenced her. And I suppose you weren't building a case against me with fabricated evidence that your mother witnessed. Evidence conveniently stored in our attic. Sarah sank onto the couch, her confidence fading. You found the box. I did. And I have video of you and your mother creating false evidence. What were you thinking, Sarah? Was our whole marriage a lie? She looked up, tears in her eyes. No, I loved you. I still do in a way, but Mum said what? That I'd eventually become abusive because I'm Turkish? That you could take me for everything I have? That my family's business was worth targeting? The anger I'd suppressed for weeks finally surfaced. Sarah's tears flowed freely now. She kept saying you were going to hurt me eventually, that men like you always do. She had all these statistics about domestic violence in Middle Eastern cultures, and then she started talking about how much money I could get. I couldn't keep the hurt out of my voice. And you believed her? After 6 years together? She shook her head. Not at first, but she was so persistent every day. More articles, more horror stories. She even had this friend whose daughter married someone from Iran, and he supposedly became this monster after they had kids. So because some random person's daughter had a bad marriage, ours was doomed. That's racist, Sarah. plain and simple. She flinched at the word. I know it is. I started to realize that a few days ago, but by then, things had gone so far. Mom had already paid the lawyer. I sat across from her, keeping my distance. Where's Ethan? With John. I didn't want him here for this. Sarah nodded, relieved. Then her phone rang, Margaret calling. Sarah stared at it for a moment before declining the call. What happens now? She asked quietly. That depends. The papers I filed request joint custody and a fair division of assets, no false abuse claims, no attempt to destroy each other. But I can't just pretend this didn't happen, Sarah. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. Margaret's text started buzzing through her phone. Sarah eventually turned it off. I don't know if I want a divorce, she said softly. These past few weeks I've felt like I'm losing my mind. Mum was always there, pushing and pushing. But when I'm alone, I miss you, the real you, not the monster she painted. I didn't expect that. I wanted to comfort her, but the trust had been broken. I don't know if our marriage can recover from this, I said, but I do know your mother can never have this kind of influence in our lives again. Sarah looked up sharply. You want me to cut off my mother? I want you to see how toxic she is. She nearly destroyed our family for money and her own prejudice. We talked for hours that night, a painful, honest conversation about how we got here. Sarah admitted to feeling disconnected from her identity in our neighborhood, surrounded by my large extended family. Margaret had exploited that vulnerability. But that doesn't excuse what I did, Sarah said. I should have talked to you instead of plotting behind your back. It was nearly midnight when I picked up Ethan from John's. Sarah and I agreed on a tentative ceasefire. We'd go to counseling, both marriage and individual therapy, to help Sarah address her relationship with her mother. For now, Margaret was not welcome in our home. The next few days were awkward but oddly hopeful. Sarah moved into the guest room to give us space. She called in sick from work and spent the day clearing out the evidence from the attic, breaking down in tears multiple times as she realized the gravity of what she'd nearly done. Margaret, meanwhile, was relentless. She called repeatedly, showed up at our door, we didn't answer, and even tried to contact Ethan's school. I recorded everything just in case. Then came the confrontation we couldn't avoid. Robert and James arranged a family meeting at their house, excluding Margaret. When we arrived, I was surprised to see Sarah's sister, Emily, who had flown in from Seattle. We gathered around Robert's dining table, the tension palpable. I explained everything and showed the video footage. Emily looked stunned. Mum tried to get me involved too, she admitted. She called last month, asking if I'd ever seen Kadir lose his temper. I told her she was being ridiculous. Robert cleared his throat. I've spoken with Margaret. She admits to encouraging the divorce, but claims she was just protecting Sarah. I don't believe her, he said, looking at me. I'm sorry, Kadir. This should never have happened. Sarah was crying silently beside me. Not the crocodile tears I'd seen recently, but genuine guilt. Despite the tears, she spoke calmly. I made a terrible mistake. I let Mum's prejudice and greed cloud my judgment, and I nearly destroyed my family. She looked at me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am truly sorry. James leaned forward. The question is, what now? Mum's not going to just back off. She has to, Robert said firmly. I've made that clear to her. This ends now, or there will be consequences. Emily nodded. We're with you, Kadir. Whatever you decide about your marriage, you'll always be Ethan's father and part of this family. The support from Sarah's family was overwhelming. After years of feeling like an outsider, I was finally accepted. Ironically, just as my marriage was crumbling, we left with much to consider. On the way home, Sarah asked, Do you think we can ever get past this? I gripped the steering wheel tightly. I honestly don't know, but for Ethan's sake, I'm willing to try. The road to rebuilding trust was tough. In the weeks that followed, I caught Sarah staring at her phone, wondering if she was talking to Margaret. Some nights, I woke up in a cold sweat, wondering if this was all a setup. But there were bright moments too. Sarah found a therapist, specializing in toxic family dynamics. She started engaging with my family, even trying to learn Turkish cooking from my mother. Most importantly, she rebuffed Margaret's repeated attempts to interfere. The turning point came a month after the confrontation. Margaret showed up uninvited, barging in when Sarah opened the door. This has gone on long enough, she declared. I've spoken with another attorney. We can still file with the evidence we gathered. I was upstairs but heard every word through the living room camera. I waited, pulse racing, for Sarah's response. There is no way, Mom, Sarah said firmly. What we did was wrong. Kadir is a good man and a wonderful father. Your prejudice nearly cost me my family. Margaret scoffed. Don't be so dramatic. Men like him always. Sarah cut her off, her voice stronger than I'd heard in months. If you can't respect my husband and the father of my child, you need to leave. And don't come back until you can treat him with dignity. From my spot at the top of the stairs, I heard the front door open. This isn't over, Margaret growled. Yes, it is, Sarah said, shutting the door firmly. I waited a few minutes before going downstairs. Sarah was on the couch, looking exhausted but somehow lighter. You heard? She asked. I nodded, sitting beside her. Thank you. She took my hand tentatively. I meant every word. I've been so blind, Kadir. I can't believe I almost threw away everything that matters. For what? Money? My mother's approval. That night, we talked about possibly withdrawing the divorce papers. It wouldn't be easy, and we had a lot of work ahead, but for the first time since finding those documents, I felt hope that our family could heal. That night was the first in weeks where I truly believed we could get through this. I wasn't sure if our marriage would ever be the same, but seeing Sarah stand up to Margaret was monumental. Maybe there was something worth saving. The next morning, Sarah suggested we take Ethan to the park. It felt strange at first, like we were playing at being a family for our son's sake. But watching Ethan run around the playground, laughing and carefree, reminded me why we were fighting so hard to make things right. He looks happy, Sarah said, sitting beside me on a bench. Yeah, I agreed. Kids are pretty resilient. Do you think he senses something's wrong between us? I shrugged. Kids pick up on more than we think, but I'm doing my best to keep things normal for him. Sarah nodded, watching Ethan climb the monkey bars. Me too. That's why I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. Here we go again. What is it? Mum's planning something. James called me last night after you went to bed. She's been meeting with another lawyer, someone aggressive who specializes in high-conflict divorces. I sighed heavily. Of course, Margaret wouldn't give up so easily. What does that mean for us? I don't know exactly, but James thinks she's going to try to force my hand, maybe threaten to cut me off financially or something. Sarah paused. I know that shouldn't matter, but your parents have always helped you out, I finished. Sarah's family was well off, having provided a down payment for our house and helped with Ethan's private school tuition. I'm not saying I'd choose money over our family, Sarah said quickly. I just wanted you to know what we might be up against. I appreciated the honesty at least. Thanks for telling me. Ethan ran up, demanding we watch him go down the big slide, so we didn't have time to dwell on it. For the rest of the afternoon, we set aside our worries and focused on being parents. That evening, after Ethan went to bed, I called Thomas to update him. He wasn't surprised about Margaret's new lawyer. People like her don't back down easily, he said, but her position is weak now. You have evidence of the fabricated abuse claims, and Sarah's no longer cooperating with her. So what should we do? I asked. Stay the course. Keep documenting everything. If you and Sarah are truly working on reconciliation, we can file to dismiss the divorce petition, but I'd wait a bit to ensure things are stable. I agreed. Trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight. The next week was relatively calm. Sarah and I started couples therapy with a counselor, Dr. Quinn, unrelated to Sarah's sister. Our first session was tough, lots of tears and hard truths. I admitted to feeling betrayed, and Sarah shared how Margaret had preyed on her fears about our cultural differences. I was always a bit intimidated by your family, she said in our second session. Everyone speaking Turkish at gatherings, all the traditions I didn't understand. I sometimes felt like an outsider. You never told me that, I said, genuinely shocked. I didn't want to seem ignorant or racist, but Mom used that. She kept saying I was losing my identity, that Ethan was becoming more Turkish than American. Dr. Quinn helped us see how we both contributed to the problem, me for not noticing Sarah's discomfort, and Sarah for not communicating her feelings. It wasn't an excuse for Margaret's actions, but it helped me understand how she'd found a weakness to exploit. Things at home slowly improved. Sarah moved back to our bedroom. We weren't intimate yet, but we were gentle with each other, like handling something fragile that could break if we moved too fast. Then Margaret struck again. I came home from work on Thursday to find Sarah at the kitchen table, pale, her hand trembling as she held a thick packet. What's wrong? I asked, setting down my laptop bag. Mom sent this. She pushed the envelope toward me. It's a trust fund document. Apparently, they set up a college fund for Ethan when he was born, almost $200,000. No. I skimmed the papers. Okay, and? There's a condition. The money can only be accessed if Ethan is living primarily with me or my parents. If we stay married or share custody, the money goes to charity. I felt the familiar anger rising. She's using Ethan's education as leverage. Sarah nodded miserably. There's a letter too. She handed me a cream-colored note with Margaret's elegant calligraphy. The letter was everything you'd expect from her fake concern for Sarah's well-being. Thinly veiled racist remarks about my family's influence, and a clear ultimatum: leave me and get the money, or stay, and Ethan suffers. What do you want to do? I asked gently. Sarah looked up, her eyes red but resolute. I already called Dad. He had no idea about these conditions on the trust. He's furious with Mom. That doesn't answer my question, I said. I'm not choosing money over our family, Kadir. Not again. I made that mistake once, and I'm still trying to fix it. She took a deep breath. But I wanted to be honest with you about everything. No more secrets. I believed her for the first time in weeks. I truly believed her. The next day, Robert called me directly. I'm sorting out this trust fund nonsense, he said, sounding angrier than I'd ever heard him. Margaret had no right to add those conditions without consulting me. I appreciate that, I said, but honestly, it's not about the money. I know, he said, it's the principle. She's trying to buy our grandson's future. I won't stand for it. Robert offered to come over that weekend to talk with both of us. When he arrived on Saturday, he brought a file. I've spoken with our family attorney, he said as we sat in the living room. The trust, as Margaret presented it, isn't legally binding. I never signed off on those conditions. Sarah looked relieved. So, the money is still there for Ethan's education? Yes, regardless of your marital status or custody arrangement. Robert hesitated. But there's something else you should know. I've been looking into our finances after all this came to light. He opened the file, revealing bank statements and transfer records. Margaret has been moving money for months, small amounts at first, then larger, nearly $100,000 so far. Where was it going? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew. To a separate account in her name only. He looked at Sarah. I think she was planning to fund your divorce and new life without telling me. Sarah covered her face with her hands. Oh my God, I've frozen the accounts for now, Robert continued, but I wanted you both to know what's been happening. Sarah was quiet for a long time after Robert left. Finally, she looked at me, tears in her eyes. I'm so ashamed. My own mother was stealing from my father to fund this insane plan. I sat beside her on the couch. It's not your fault. Part of it is. I let her convince me you were the villain when she was the one manipulating everyone. She wiped her eyes. I need to tell you something else, something I haven't admitted yet. My heart raced. What is it? When Mom first started talking about divorce, I didn't take it seriously. But then she introduced me to this friend of hers, Linda. Linda told me this awful story about her daughter who married a man from Jordan, how he seemed perfect at first but became controlling and violent. And you thought that would happen with me? I asked, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. No, that's just it. I didn't believe it would happen with you. But Mom kept pushing, and then she broke off. Then what? Then I found out Linda doesn't even have a daughter. James discovered it by accident when he was looking into Mom's friends. Linda was an actress Mom hired to tell this story. Sarah's voice broke. My own mother paid someone to lie to me about an abusive foreign husband to convince me to leave you. I was speechless. Margaret had gone to extraordinary lengths. I wanted you to know everything, Sarah said quietly. Even the parts that make me look gullible and stupid. I took her hand, not quite forgiveness, but something close. Thank you for telling me. The next few days were a strange mix of progress and strain. Sarah and I were communicating better than we had in months, but Margaret's ongoing schemes were wearing us down. We decided to dismiss the divorce petition, which felt like a major step forward. Then, out of nowhere, Margaret showed up at Ethan's school. I got a call from the principal while I was at work. Mr. Demir, we had an incident today. Your mother-in-law tried to pick up Ethan without authorization. My blood ran cold. Is Ethan okay? He's fine. Our staff followed protocol and refused to release him, but Mrs. Thompson became quite agitated. We had to ask her to leave. I immediately called Sarah, and we both left work to go to the school. Ethan was in the principal's office, looking confused but otherwise fine. Grandma came to school, he told us. She said we were going on a special trip, but Mrs. Davis wouldn't let me go. Sarah knelt to his level. Grandma didn't tell us about any trip, buddy. You did the right thing staying with your teacher. Sarah was trembling with anger on the way home. She tried to take our son without permission. I know, I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. This has gone too far, Kadir. We need to do something. I agreed. That night, after Ethan was asleep, we called Robert and James to update them. Robert was devastated. I don't recognize who Margaret has become, he said. First the money, now this. James was more practical. You need a restraining order. Sarah hesitated. That feels extreme. She tried to take Ethan from school without permission. James reminded her. What if she succeeds next time? The next morning we met with Thomas again. He agreed a restraining order was necessary given Margaret's escalating behavior. We filed the paperwork that day, requesting she stay away from our home, Ethan's school, and our workplaces. The temporary order was granted quickly, but Margaret could contest it in court in 2 weeks. Thomas warned us it would be tough. She'll likely bring up the abuse allegations again, he said. Even though we have evidence they were fabricated, be prepared for some ugly accusations. The 2 weeks were tense. We informed Ethan's school about the restraining order and tightened security at home. Sarah was a nervous wreck, torn between protecting our family and facing the reality of taking legal action against her mother. Margaret, meanwhile, went on the offensive, calling every family member to claim I was manipulating Sarah and turning her against her own mother. Most saw through it, especially after James shared what we knew, but a few distant relatives sided with Margaret. The hearing day arrived. Sarah and I dropped Ethan off with my brother, Amir, who promised to keep him busy with a trip to the aquarium. Sarah squeezed my hand as we entered the courthouse. Whatever happens in there, we're in this together, she said. Margaret was already inside with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. She didn't look at us, but I felt her glare from across the room. The hearing was exactly as Thomas had predicted. Margaret's lawyer portrayed me as a controlling, potentially dangerous husband who had brainwashed Sarah into retracting her abuse allegations. They leaned into every stereotype about Middle Eastern men, barely disguising their prejudice as concern. When it was our turn, Thomas methodically presented our evidence. The video of Margaret coaching Sarah to fabricate charges, the financial records showing Margaret's theft, and the statement from Ethan's school about the unauthorized pickup attempt. Judge Thornton, a no-nonsense older woman, listened intently to both sides. After all the evidence was presented, she addressed Margaret directly. Miss S. Thompson, the evidence suggests you have engaged in a pattern of deception and manipulation aimed at destroying your daughter's marriage for reasons that appear primarily rooted in prejudice, she said sternly. Furthermore, your attempt to remove your grandson from school without parental permission is deeply concerning. Margaret tried to interrupt, but Judge Thornton silenced her with a look. The restraining order is granted for 1 year. You are to stay at least 500 feet from your daughter, her husband, their child, their home, workplaces, and the child's school. Any violation will result in immediate consequences. She turned to us. Mr. and Mrs. Demir, I recommend you pursue family counseling to address the damage this situation has caused. As we left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The restraining order would keep us safe, but the fact that we needed it at all was heartbreaking, especially for Sarah. Are you okay? I asked as we walked to the car. She nodded slowly. I think so. It feels like the end of something, but maybe also the start of something better. Over the next few months, our lives gradually stabilized. With Margaret legally barred from contact, we could focus on rebuilding our family without her influence. Sarah continued her individual therapy, grappling with the complex emotions of essentially losing her mother while saving her marriage. Robert filed for divorce from Margaret, unable to forgive her financial deceit and attempts to control their daughter. He became a regular visitor at our home, reconnecting with Ethan and, surprisingly, forming a friendship with my father. When my parents visited from Turkey 6 months after the hearing, Sarah and I renewed our vows in a small backyard ceremony, nothing extravagant, just close friends and family, celebrating that we'd weathered the storm. My brother Amir brought his famous kebabs, James handled the music, and Emily made everything look beautiful. During the ceremony, Sarah surprised me with her own vow, spoken in halting but well-practiced Turkish. Her effort to learn those few lines in my native tongue moved me more than anything else. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Ethan was asleep, Sarah and I sat on our back porch, looking at the stars. Do you think we'll ever fully get past this? She asked. I thought for a moment. I don't know if get past is the right way to think about it. It happened. It changed us, but maybe it also made us stronger in some ways. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder. I'm still sorry. I know, I said, but I'm not looking backward anymore, and I meant it. Trust wasn't fully restored, and it might never be, but Ethan was happy. Sarah and I were working through our issues, and for the first time in a long time, our future looked promising. Margaret eventually moved to Florida after her divorce from Robert was finalized. We heard through James that she'd joined a group for parents estranged from their ungrateful children, apparently finding plenty of others who refused to own their toxic behavior. We renewed the restraining order, though Margaret hadn't tried to contact us directly. Sarah looked sad when Mother's Day ads appeared, and Ethan occasionally asked about his other grandmother. Those moments were tough, but they became less frequent over time. The most unexpected outcome was how close I grew to Sarah's father and siblings. Robert joined us for Sunday dinners. James became my regular golf buddy, and Emily moved back from Seattle to be closer to family, becoming Ethan's favorite aunt. Sarah and I weren't perfect, but we were trying. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Sarah found an old photo of us from when we were dating, young and carefree, standing in front of my parents' restaurant in Turkey during her first visit. "We look so happy," she said wistfully. "We were," I said, looking over her shoulder at the picture, "and we will be again." She turned to me, her expression serious. "I almost threw this away, all of it." "For what? My mother's approval? Money?" I shook my head. "It doesn't matter anymore. You didn't throw it away. That's what counts." As I held my wife in my arms that night, I knew we'd be okay, not because everything was magically fixed or because we'd forgotten what happened, but because we'd both chosen to fight for our family, even when it would have been easier to walk away.